but he asked if he could sign out a post-sample HK. It was a G36, as I recall. I said, yeah, no problem. What are you going to do? You're going to go shoot this weekend? He goes, yeah, we're going to go shoot. I said, okay, no problem. And he came back the following Monday, and I go, how was it? Where did you do? He goes, well, we were LARPing. And I'm like,
oh, no.
This is the first time I'd heard the term. This is, 7 years ago or more. And I go, you were what? And he goes, yeah, we were practicing room clearing. My friend's parents have this rental and it was vacant. And so we had a 3-man stack and we're doing a dynamic entry and we're clearing, we're practicing our room clearing.
Oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know who I'm talking about. And like my head is just about to explode. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like with my post-sample machine gun? Like what happens if the neighbors call the cops because they see these 3 guys in kit kicking in the
Clearing
door
at mom's rental.
at mom's rental because they know who the neighbors are and you ain't the neighbors. What the fuck are you doing?
You're listening to the Art and War podcast with your hosts Nathan, B.R. and Paige. Nathan is a Canadian illustrator with a couple years of military experience. B.R. is a British anarchist that moved to the States. And Paige is a lifelong artist based in Washington. All 3 are passionate shooters and community builders. Together, they run the Seaburn Art Page. Enjoy the show.
As far as we're concerned, Jason, you have probably more than can fit into one episode, I guarantee. But that being said, I know that you do a lot in the realm of firearms, not just in the U.S., but all over the place. For those of you who don't know, Hurricane Butterfly here is actually a good friend of mine. I've known him now for, how many years have we known each other? At least 5, something like that. Jax, my guy, and I have gone to SHOT Show representing Hurricane Butterfly for a few years, or at least a couple years, 3 years, 2 years. Jackson for sure, at least 3 years. So we got to meet you through that. But why don't you just give us a little bit of what it is that you do, and we'll let things kind of take off from there.
I don't know if I can answer that question easily. The trite answer is that we do import, export, and a little bit of manufacturing. We really try not to hype up what we do. We have a social media presence, but you don't see a whole lot of us crowing about what we do or who we're shipping to. Most recently we had a big shipment going to a customer, and I posted pictures of 30 wooden crates. That was it. We really just don't publicize what we do too much.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth, you do work with a lot of foreign militaries, governments, and things like that. But even domestically, like I was there back in, was it 2020 where we had to move your warehouse because you had Antifa threats, or was that 2021?
That was Summer Love 2020. I started a law enforcement supply business. We had done import-export for many, many years. We started that probably around 2008, 2009 is when I kind of started that side of the business.
For those people who don't know exactly what that is, can you just elaborate a little bit on like what that means, law enforcement supplier? Because that's a big term.
Yeah, so this will get complicated quickly. Why don't I just start from the beginning? We'll just start from the beginning, which is I was practicing law. I'd always had an interest in firearms, but I had to get through law school and I had to work at a BS law firm, and I hated it. And long story short, I opened my own business as a lawyer and was doing export compliance for companies in the industry. My law firm worked with ATF, Customs, State Department, Commerce Department, and Census Bureau, of all people, to make sure that my clients in the industry were compliant. Problem with compliance is nobody wants to listen to compliance. Nobody wants to do what you tell them to do. And as outside counsel, it's true. You tell them to do this and like, yeah, okay. And then it never gets done, right? And as outside counsel, there's no way to verify that they actually did it. And about 2008, 2009, my current business partner came to me and he said, I have this company, and it was established in 2004 or so. It has all of the ATF registrations. It has all of the ITAR registrations. This is when ITAR was still, $1,750 a year. He said, it cost me about $4,000 a year to maintain this company. Help me make $4,000 a year to pay for these annual registrations. And I said, yeah, I think I can do that. And so I took over his company. And last year, I think we did close to 10 million in sales. So we've covered that $4,000, annual nut pretty easily. Obviously, our expenses have gone up since then.
I was gonna say, there's got to be a lot of expenses. That's not net profit.
That's not net. That's gross sales. Sales. And even that isn't nothing to crow about. That's we know we can do better. But that said, we did import export for many, many years. At some point, I'm sure you'll want to talk about the 416 project. That was an import project that we did. But the problem with import export is that it's very, very cyclical. And so, 1 year you'll have a very good year, and the next year or the next 2 years will be slim. And you're always kind of just tightening the belt, waiting for that next big project. And it's you see peaks and valleys in your sales, in your income stream. And so to kind of combat that, I got into law enforcement sales in 2018. We started selling all kinds of stuff. And within the first year, we decided, you know what, we're going to focus on the hard to get items that you cannot buy at your local gun store. The best business is one that has very little competition. And so, we now focus on less lethal. We focus on selling flashbang grenades, noise flash distraction devices, NFDDs, tear gas grenades, and that sort of thing. It's fairly rewarding. It's kind of fun, I get to throw tear gas grenades with some regularity, It's a good day.
I don't know a ton about the laws surrounding flashbangs, but can you buy one as a civilian? I feel like there's an obvious answer to that I simply don't know. I want one, but I haven't looked into it.
Can and legal are a different story, my friend.
Yes.
The reality is that you should just come over to my place and we just throw one, and you'd be like, really? That's it? Yeah.
I think most of the appeal to it is that I don't think I can own one. I feel like it's...
So now I want one.
Yes.
I remember the first time I ever went to your shop, Jason, and you had your inside of your warehouse, there was a Connex. And I first walked in the office and I'm just fucking around playing. I'm like, oh, cool. There's just literal rocket launchers hanging out. Not oh yeah, that's cool. I'm like, oh, it's like a Call of Duty loadout, but I'm just fucking around with stuff. And then at this time I was still very new to shooting. And so my beginning shooting, sorry for anyone who is yeah, fuck you, you bougie bitch. But some of the first guns I shot in a serious capacity were your MP7, MP5K. We got to pop the cherry on your 240B. We had, I don't even remember what all that shit we had, but Jason had this Connex inside of his warehouse that was just this fucking vault of guns from movies and every kind of conceivable sniper rifle, artillery weapon, I just name it, grenades, anything that goes boom is what he's probably walking us to one of his Connex.
Yeah. He's got a big old smile on his face.
Oh yeah. We got that's his slave he keeps in the box. For you guys who can't see, he's got a Connex inside and someone popping out. But it's pretty awesome.
Oh, this looks exactly I saw this in a documentary. I think it was about you.
Yeah.
It was not about me.
It was. Nicolas Cage played you, didn't he?
Not exactly, but this is the Connex that Paige is talking about. And I don't know if I can turn my camera around, but
are you
this
based
is my personal collection.
Washington area?
No, he's in Idaho.
He's in Idaho? Where?
Yeah, we're not going to dox him on here, but he's in Idaho. We'll talk
Northern
about it
later.
later.
Southern?
Outside of Boise. We
okay,
talked about
I'll
this.
see you in
We talked about this in a
4 hours.
PM before you moved. You're way up north.
Yeah. I should have dropped it on the way or something.
Your first mistake is expecting Nathan to remember anything.
Yes. No, we did talk about it. I just forgot.
So yeah, basically he's got access to. So we have effectively now an ex-lawyer or no longer practicing lawyer.
Yes.
You were still a lawyer at some point,
Still a lawyer.
who then by means started getting machine guns, etc., and using your lawyer knowledge to slide you into this world of international shenanigans, which led to law enforcement sales of less lethal things, which now puts us back at the Summer of Love.
Summer of Love, yes. Way to bring it back around. So Summer of Love. Go ahead, Nathan.
For whoever's listening couldn't see the visuals that we just saw, it looked like the Punisher's battle van. It looked like a scene from Lord of War. It was pretty great. Sorry, Summer of Love, yes.
Summer of Love. You know, this isn't a secret, but part of our business strategy has been to stock some of these items, these tear gas grenades, these NFDDs. Because we've learned that many law enforcement agencies do not adequately plan. And very often we get a call saying, hey, we need some tear gas. Can you get it to us? 2 weeks ago, my local PD called us after hours. It was about 6:30 in the evening. They were with the U.S. Marshal's office, and they were trying to arrest an overachiever. He was in his mom's house, and he refused to come out. They had purchased 24 tear gas grenades just 5 weeks prior, and they're calling us at 6:30 in the evening saying, hey, we need more tear gas. And so we gathered up what we had, and we delivered it to the scene 35 minutes later. That's kind of what we do. You know, we have it in stock. You need it, we deliver it. Many dealers don't do that. They take your order, they submit it to the manufacturer, and you wait 6 to 8 weeks. And that's not good customer service. That doesn't help you build your business. That doesn't help you with clients. And so coming back to Summer Love, we had inventory, and we were one of the very few on the West Coast that had inventory. And so Seattle, Tukwila, Washington State Patrol,
Portland and stuff as well.
Yeah, Oregon State Police, even an agency just outside of New York City reached out to us. A town in the Midwest reached out to us. I don't know how they found us, but you know, the day before, it was a Sunday afternoon, and my local police department reached out to me. They said, hey, there's going to be a protest tomorrow. We need a quote for these items. I said, yep, no problem. And about 7:30 that evening, I got a call back from them again. And they said, that quote, we need it now. And you could hear the stress in his voice. And we said, oh, okay. And I piled the wife and kid into the car, and we were, Paige will know where we lived at the time. We lived about half an hour from the office, and we're going down I-405 from Kirkland down to Tukwila, and the streets are the highway's deserted, and every off ramp has a police officer blocking the exits, and we are literally the only car on 405 on a Sunday afternoon, like unheard of. And I'm going about 7.
For those of you who don't know, that highway is dog shit. It is a dog shit highway. Always. Doesn't matter what time of fuck all day, that highway is like, there's a car flipped over and burning somewhere. And you're like, cool, traffic stop. Because, yeah, anyway, just to give you some perspective.
Right. And we are the only car. And I'm going about 70. Speed limit, I think, is 60. And we get passed by a state trooper, and he just blows past us. And about 10 minutes later, 5 minutes later, another one just blows past us. And I realized, ain't nobody going to stop me for speeding. Nobody's on traffic patrol. And so I bump it to 80 or 85, and we get down to Tukwila, and there's a ton of people just loitering. You know, you just don't see people loitering in that neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon. and they're dressed in black, and we're like, what is going on? And we get to the office, and I turn to the wife and I said, you got to go home. You take our kid, and you got to go home. Like, this is not safe. I will be okay, but I don't want to worry about you guys. And so they left, and a buddy of mine met me at the shop, and we loaded up nearly all of our inventory. By now it was dark. We drove to the South Center Mall, where a bunch of looting had already taken place. And 4 law enforcement agencies had set up a command post on the top of the parking lot. We drove up to the line, and they let us through, and they escorted us into the command post. Our local police department said, we're going to take first dibs. What do you got? And once they took what they wanted, they put it across the radio and said, okay, guys, resupply is here. And I equate it to being like an ice cream truck. We just started selling 40 millimeter munitions and tear gas grenades out of the back of the truck. And we just had a piece of cardboard and a Sharpie, and we just wrote down the officer's name, his agency, and what he took. That was it, right?
I was going to say, do you take Stripe? Like,
you guys, it's the Iceman. Go get your stuff from the Iceman.
Do you have like a little speaker on the top of your truck that plays a jingle? Because if not, you really need one.
That's amazing. I wish we had that. It'd be like how we could order machine guns from Sears catalogs back in like the 50s and 60s. I just love that.
With a really fucked up jingle.
Truck with guns.
It was one of those events that I don't know I will ever be able to repeat. Obviously that was the kickoff to Summer of Love. And, on our Instagram, there's some photos of that night. But then the next 3 days were insane. We had an agency from Oregon. They called us and they said, what do you have in stock? And I emailed them the list, and they say, okay, we want this. And we pack it, and they say, okay, the aircraft is on the way. And they flew from Oregon up to Renton Field, and we loaded them up, and he took off, and, we're watching the news, and we see all of our munitions being used. And they call the next morning, they say, okay, what do you have left? And I said, the list isn't getting longer. The list is getting shorter. What happened to everything we sold you yesterday? And they said, well, we used it all. We need more. And so, I think they did that 2 or 3 times. After that, the exigent circumstances weren't really there. And so we would meet, south of Olympia. I would drive south. They would drive north. We'd meet halfway there. We'd go trunk to trunk, and we just unload from my trunk into their trunk. And then they'd jump back in the car and drive back south in Oregon, and I'd drive home. I mean, it was wild. And then after 3 days, we had nothing, like nothing. We were sold out. And it would take us another 6 or 8 months to get restocked again. And people always kind of joke, and they think that, well, wow, you had these amazing 3 days of sales, and yeah, it was great. But remember that it was 2020, and the first 3 months of that year we had 0 revenue. I think we made a single sale for $20, in those first 3 months, and then once we sold all of our inventory, we couldn't restock it. And so we had 0 revenue for the next 3 months.
Well, it was because of those quotes too. Someone had got a hold of one of those quotes and published it. And that was how you basically got doxxed, right?
Sure. One of the newspapers down in the Portland area did a expose, air quotes, expose. And if you recall, Antifa and BLM filed a lawsuit against law enforcement agencies in the Portland area to stop them from using tear gas and what they were calling chemical munitions. They're really not chemical munitions, but it's all in the terminology and how you spin it. They failed in federal court, and so they did the next best thing, which was to file a Freedom of Information Act to find out the source. And that's how they got a hold of our invoices. And so on Labor Day. The
newspaper did this?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The journalist did this?
The journalist did it, and indirectly or directly Antifa members and BLM members did it as well.
Oof.
And so in the in the uh, in the newspaper article, the online version, there are copies of our invoices. They're partially redacted, but it did show our name and our Dropbox address. Um, my mentor taught me very early: you don't put your physical address out there if you can help it. Um, we had a Dropbox at a UPS store. I'm comfortable telling you this now because we're not in Washington State anymore. Um, but we had a Dropbox, and that's the address they got. But of course, once you know our name, FFLs are public information. You just go online, and ATF will tell you what my physical address is. It just takes a little more work. And so Labor Day of 2020, I had just put in an offer on a new house in Idaho. I'm driving home, and my local police department, the same guy who called me a few months prior in June during the Summer of Love, or April or May or whenever it was, he calls and says, you've been doxxed. And I said, what does that mean? And he has to explain it to me. And he emails me the link, and cold chill goes through my body, because my office and my warehouse was really kind of my storage unit. You know, I had pictures of my
Fit a
kid.
lot of shit in there.
I had a lot of did. I mean, I think it was 7,500 square feet. And, you know, rather than keep the kayaks at home, and rather than keep a lot of the stuff that I don't use very often, I just stored them at the office in the warehouse. And so, you know, law enforcement said, expect an arson or an arson attempt. And there's nothing you can do to stop that, right? It's going to take less than 30 seconds to throw a firebomb through our front window, and then they're gone. You can't stop it. And so I called Paige and Jax and just about every person I could think of that owed me a favor, or that I could just call that was going to be reliable. And I recall getting 10 or 12 guys there with their girlfriends and wives. I think we had 2 or 3 trucks. I know we had 2 trailers, and we just loaded up everything that we could. And we moved about a quarter mile away. We didn't have to move far. We just need to move someplace else, right? Get off the X. And
he didn't go to Idaho from just like for the sake of clarity. Like he didn't go from Idaho. He ended up having another warehouse he was able to get that wasn't far. That was enough that we could at least move everything to the next location as like a temporary hold. So we still had an office in Washington for a while,
right.
Up until fairly recently, I think, right?
Right. We picked up this 5,000, 7,000 square foot warehouse. I think I recall starting around 6:00 in the evening and finishing around 2 in the morning. We just picked up everything we could and moved it a quarter mile into a new warehouse space. And you know, when I served in Iraq, I served doing information operations, which is a fancy word for propaganda. And so Paige, I think, will remember this. In our front office, it was just glass windows, and we raised all of the blinds so you could see in. The office space was empty. I mean, it was carpet and ceiling tiles. There was nothing in there, right? And I turned the lights on, and I locked the door behind me, and I walked away, with the idea that if somebody was going to firebomb me, if someone was going to commit an arson, they're going to pull up, and they're going to see this empty office space. It's, you know, there's nothing there. Why am I going to throw a firebomb? He's gone. He's not there. And I will never know if they tried to do something, or if somebody pulled up wanting to cause havoc. But I
if
know
I may,
that
you had mentioned that like your local law enforcement contacted and like knew. How did they find out that this was going to happen to you, and how, you know, and then relayed that to you?
yeah, they published it on Twitter, and this may not be well known, but most law enforcement agencies, even small ones, my local one at the time is pretty small. They've got a guy dedicated to doing that electronic intelligence. going on Twitter, going onto social media, looking at what people are saying, and Antifa, both the Antifa Twitter and the BLM Twitter, doxed us that day, and that's how he saw it and how he found it. One of my employees at the time was on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, although I might be now. And she tracked it down and followed it down the rabbit hole. And apparently it had been retweeted several hundred times. So we certainly took it as a legitimate threat, and acted accordingly.
So during this move, did you just you moved everything? You were moving like 240s and all sorts of goodies just in the back of people's trucks. Man,
Mhm.
that
In crates, wood crates.
Yeah.
those are good fucking people if everything made it to the warehouse.
Yeah.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, earlier today, you saw a brief peek into the Connex, and we had 4 or 5 wooden crates that were 6 foot by 4 foot by 3 foot, and we had moving blankets and bubble wrap, and we just started laying guns in there like cordwood.
We couldn't even fit the sniper rifles and like crates. Like we had to find alternative methods to put like the rocket launchers and the sniper rifles other places because they didn't even like fit in the crates with all the other like varieties of whatever fuck all weapon you can imagine. Jason has it. Like
That's just an absurd sentence that you just spoke, but
it's awesome. It's awesome.
But
he has his own Hummer with a turret too.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Which we use in a movie, kind of. But
yeah, that's right. That was yeah.
The Tacticats.
Yeah. That was what we had.
Yeah, you just brought that up the other day.
Yeah. No, that was a fun little project. Hopefully, we'll get to do some more stuff with your pew pews down the line, Jason.
Sure.
Speaking of going as far as stories, though, and things happening, for some people who may not know, you have some very direct relations to the timeline of War Dogs.
That story is also not a secret. I've posted parts of it on social media. I remember coming out of a meeting at SHOT Show, and this fat kid comes up to me and goes, are you Jason? I go, yeah. And I'm looking at him kind of squirrely, like, who are you? I don't know who you are. And he goes, oh, my name is Efraim, and I don't know, and I don't remember what he's saying, but he's just running his mouth like, and he won't shut up, and I'm like staring at him like, who are you, and I finally like, buddy, I gotta go. I got a meeting on the other side of SHOT Show in 5 minutes. I gotta go. And he goes, oh yeah, no problem. It's fine. Here's my car. I'm like, shut up. I gotta go away. When you watch that movie, it starts off and he's moving to Florida because he had a bad experience with his uncle's shop in California. And I don't think it's any secret that was BOTAC tactical. Certainly in the 90s. Yeah. In the 90s, BOTAC had a really bad reputation. They'd sell you stuff, they'd take your money, and then you'd wait like months for it to deliver. And that was part of
Optics Planet.
Well, don't get me started. I met those guys before too. But BOTAC had a bad reputation in the late 90s, and that was my understanding, at least, is that Efraim was involved in that. And so he moves to Florida, and the global war on terror started, and this contract for ammunition came out. We know the story. We knew that only ATK could deliver that ammunition. We knew that. I was watching that contract. My mentor was watching that contract. It wasn't a secret. We knew that ATK was the only bidder that was going to show up. And so for Efraim to bid on that was surprising. And for him to win it was even more surprising. And it wasn't long before we heard that they were sending green ammunition, green not in the environmentally friendly description, green as in corroded and green tarnished brass, and people were dying because of this ammunition. So it certainly wasn't a surprise when he was later arrested. And so we watched that with some curiosity. And probably around 2009, 2010, I don't remember I'm terrible with dates, but we knew that Efraim was at trial, and that he had been convicted, and there was a week or two before sentencing. And I'm sitting at my desk one afternoon, and my assistant answers the phone, and she says, yes, okay, hang on, puts him on hold and turns to me and goes, can you take a call? And I said, yeah, who is it? She goes, I don't know, they won't tell me. I'm like, okay. And I take the call, and the caller on the other side says, is this Jason? And I go, yeah. And they say, hang on just a moment, I have someone that wants to talk to you. And they put me on hold. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, the damn president of the United States better get on the other line. Like, what the fuck is this, right? And sure enough, here comes Efraim. Efraim answers the phone. He goes, hey, I'm Efraim, and I got this deal, and I was really hoping that you could help me with it, and I got a buyer, and I got a seller, and I want to be in the middle. Efraim, I know who you are. I've met you. I know who you are. We've met. Oh, yeah, that's great. Okay, I don't remember that, but okay. But so I got this buyer, I got this seller. Fuck, Efraim, shut up. And bottom line was, he had a buyer and he had a seller, and he was going to put the two together, but he needed somebody to be the intermediary, because under the ITAR, once you are charged with an arms violation, you're barred from being involved in a transaction. He hasn't just been charged, he's been convicted, right? This is far beyond the requirement for being barred from involvement. And so immediately my spidey senses are going off, and my bristles are standing up, and in my mind, in my paranoia, maybe not so paranoia, I'm thinking he's fishing. He's trying to find someone else to break the law so he can go back to the prosecutor and say, hey, I worked with law enforcement, and I got these 3, 4, 5 guys to break the law, so give me a lighter sentence. And this is all going through my head at the time. And I said, Efraim, I am not agreeing to do a deal with you. I am not agreeing to do a deal. I do not want to be involved. Give me your name, give me your number, give me your email. I will talk to my business partner, but at this point, I do not want to be involved.
You hear that, FBI?
FBI, can you hear me? I do not want to be involved. And the first thing I did was I called 3 of my colleagues, my mentors, 2 mentors and a friend. And I said, Efraim's on the prowl, and this is what's going down. And I don't necessarily want to be labeled as a bootlicker, but the next thing I did was I called my friends at my local FBI office, and I said, this is really strange, and this is what's going down, and this is my experience. And they said, that's really interesting. Thanks for the heads up. and I left it at that.
I mean, to be fair, at that point, it's almost like you have someone who, in that position, and as we know in modern day, all kinds of people who do things, you're like, that guy was hired by the feds. And it's like, if you have that and you have someone going around, like, who knows, maybe he was encouraged by the feds to be like, yeah, why don't you just call some of your friends? So you're kind of like, hey, FBI, we know what you're up to. It almost ends up being that call.
Right. Your guy is glowing. He is radioactive. No, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And so months, maybe a year later, I finally heard back from my friends in the feds. And I guess apparently they had set up a meeting with him, and he walked into the room. There was a Glock pistol on the table. Remember, he's been convicted, but he's not sentenced yet. And so he walks into the room and he picks up the pistol and he checks for clear, and he gets a sight picture. He pulls the trigger. Oh, it's a nice clean trigger. He's just, what any of us would do. And he puts the pistol down, and they go on and have their meeting. And he goes to get up and leave the meeting, and it was a sting. It was undercover law enforcement, and they arrest him immediately. Surprisingly, not on an ITAR violation, but for felon in possession, because he was a convicted felon and he picked up the pistol. Super easy charge. So I don't know that he was ever charged with it. It was enough to arrest him and put him in jail and hold him until sentencing. I understand that he has since been released. Maybe he'll hear it and call me and be like, "That's not how it happened," and whatever. But that was what I heard from my colleagues.
Possession, like proximity laws, are so fucked up too. For some people who don't realize, like, depending on your state, possession laws are different. Like in, I think, the state of Washington, in theory, if you're holding a weapon and that weapon belongs to you, that's possession. And in like Washington, if we are both in the same room and you also have a gun in your hand, that's like possession for both of us. I think that's how that works. There's some weird shit that goes down like that for the sake of like firearms and stuff.
Which is ironic because Washington will not let you rent machine guns because possession changes when the person renting the machine gun is shooting it. I think Washington likes to play fast and loose in their definitions as to how it deems them best.
Yeah, our governor is a criminal. Whatever.
Yeah.
They all are.
Yeah.
B.R. here with a quick word from our newest sponsor of the show that made our first video podcast possible, the great people over at Attorneys for Freedom. Attorneys for Freedom are a real criminal defense law firm offering attorneys on retainer for legal representation in self-defense cases, and are not some insurance company or provider. This means that Attorneys for Freedom are able to cover scenarios that are often denied coverage by other programs. Self-defense scenarios such as while in gun-free zones or sensitive areas, while under the influence or on medication, scenarios where you knew your attacker, and while using any weapon in self-defense, from a firearm to a household object or otherwise. Additionally, Attorneys for Freedom will not drop you from coverage, nor will they ever ask you to pay them back. Even if you take a plea deal where you admit guilt to a criminal act, Attorneys for Freedom will not ask to recoup their fees. Attorneys for Freedom covers 100% of your attorney's fees in the event they can reasonably argue that you were acting in self-defense, and now you're facing serious felony charges. The primary key to coverage is their ability to reasonably argue self-defense in court. Nathan and I have signed up already, and you can too in no time at all. The National Self-Protection Plan is available with a one-time sign-up fee of $100 and just $35 per month after that. Family plans and annual rates are also available. Signing up via the link in the show notes or via the Seaburn Art Instagram bio link helps support the show with both your initial sign-up and every month you retain Attorneys for Freedom services. Get covered in all 50 states, support the show, and have peace of mind that should your worst day come, Attorneys for Freedom has your back. Thanks for listening, people. How's it going, lads and ladies? BR here with a quick word from the longest running sponsor of the Art and War podcast, Advanced Warfighting Solutions. AWS have been making tough as hell gear for decades right here in the US in North Carolina. Nathan, myself, and thousands of others run that gear through the ringer and trust our lives to it, whether that's LARPing in the woods or dragging kit through war zones. AWS manufactures many great packs, pouches, plate carriers, and our personal favorite, the SMU Operator Belt. A set-and-forget gun belt that crushes in build quality, capability, and excellent feedback from its many users. We are tough on our gear here at Art and War, and the SMU takes that treatment in its stride. Though already at a sweet price point, you can knock $10 more off your SMU belt with the code ARTandWar10 at awsin.com. The code and link to the AWS website can be found in the show description. Thanks for listening, now let's get back to the show. So, a lot of people when they hear like international arms dealer, they instantly think of the whole War Dogs thing. But like, what does that look like from the more white hat perspective of international arms trading?
It's really quite boring, and your listeners aren't going to believe me when I say that. The day to day is pretty mundane. Today I came into the office and I packed 2 shipments. I'm moving a pallet to Southeast Asia later this week, and I'm moving a small box to Western Europe. And quite honestly, it's just a lot of paperwork. Tomorrow I'll be submitting 4 or 5 export licenses, and that's just a lot of dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure that you have the 4 or 5 documents you need to complete that application completely. Because if you're missing a document, the application's gonna be returned, and you need to resubmit.
And ITAR does not fuck around. Like ITAR violations are terrible.
Well, violations are terrible, but
yes, but there's some people who like other things you're kind of like, oh, you can skirt. Like ITAR is like, they're looking for it. They want you to violate shit so they can fine you $250,000 fucking dollars in infraction and then take away your
Jesus.
rights even further.
And this administration is really going after dealers.
oh, for sure. I mean, we are in the middle of an ATF compliance inspection, and some of the questions they're asking aren't even related to this FFL. They're related to FFLs that we've had in the past, and I'm looking at them like, who's guiding you on this? Who's feeding you this information? These weapons and these models that you're asking about have nothing to do with this FFL. Yeah,
Fuck
it's
the ATF.
Fuck the ATF.
yeah. I mean, yes and no. I mean, as an agency, yes. As an entity, yes. But I've met some good people that work there, and your listeners may scoff and be like, nobody good can work at the ATF, and there's good and bad everywhere you go.
Hey, on that, like it's the same way people will, oh, the ICE just deports people. I'm like, well, the ICE is also the number one preventers in like human trafficking. I met someone the other day whose dad works for the ATF and his job is to track cartel vehicles. So he literally like uses like is able to follow weapons back and forth to find and do cartel stings in the US. And those have to be pretty quiet for multiple reasons. But it was a really interesting conversation because like, yeah, as far as like regulation on guns, like anyone just like get fucked. But as far as like using cartel information against them to stop them from coming to the US and, importing more people and forcing human trafficking and things like that, like fuck yeah, fuck that shit. So it's just with anything. But in general, ATF does need to be disbanded so the important things can be gleaned from it and put into its own things.
I saw and I'm going to keep this brief because I'm really fascinated by what Jason's saying. I don't want to detract from it, but I saw a kind of a question posed with, should we disband the ATF entirely and then all of their responsibilities simply get transferred to a larger and just as evil agency, or do we simply defund them to the point where they can't actually do anything that involves infringing on the rights of American citizens and point them at things that actually matter, as you're saying, the cartels and people who are actually dangerous.
Well, here's the thing. If you go after the cartels, you go after deeper government. And then if you keep going, you end up like JFK. So that's where it all stops.
That is an episode all on its own.
At the risk of being canceled by the 2A community, I am not a fan. I'll say this up front. I'm not a fan of ATF. I mean, I get it. They have a job to do. I don't like the politicization. I don't like how political the agency has gotten. I don't like how the agency is using its powers as a weapon against law-abiding dealers. But that said, I mean, we've exported thousands of guns to Central America alone. And for a while, we'd get traces where our pistols would end up in El Salvador, Nicaragua, and wherever. And the ATF is tasked to figure out how it got there. Is that a legitimate law enforcement investigative action? Sure, right? But when they come after law-abiding dealers and they're heavy-handed, no, that is not necessary. Let me just be clear, that is not necessary. Oftentimes I've dealt with ATF quite a bit. I mean, even in my previous life as doing compliance, right? It's paternal, it's paternalistic. Like, we know better than you. And unless you know the law and you can fight back and say, yes, that is true, but here's the exception, ATF will run rampant over you. Like I think many law enforcement agencies, right? I mean, if you don't stand up for your rights, then you don't have them.
100%. When I was over at my friend Grantham's house, I was there when his ATF agent came by to like do his whole speech, and this guy was just, man, this was a lonely motherfucker. Like, I don't know if he was like secretly a fan or something, but like he just like he went on. That did not need to be a 3.5 hour conversation, but it was. The shit he was talking about, and like Mike was he's very polite, answering the questions, being friendly, whatever. And like the guy was like, man, like this dude has like his peen has not seen the inside of a vagine in I don't know how many years. Like he's just, the bald dude with the Oakley glasses,
Careful, Paige. Careful, Paige. There are only 4 slots, 4 ATF
Imagine
slots
if he.
in the
Oh.
area. There are 4 slots in the area, and only
Hey,
2
for
of
what
them
it's
are
worth,
filled.
this is me talking. I mean, Mike was he had nothing negative to say. This is true, but I was just listening, and like maybe it's just because my like maybe my female radar was going off, and I was just like, oh god, yeah, like this guy
This is an unfucked man.
Yeah, this is like there's zero negative riz for the ATF agent. I'm just like, oh sweet fucking yeah, that was bad. I just
You bring up
like the argument like, oh, they could have been like a nice guy. I'm like, dude, this motherfucker, like he's like probably fishing alone on the weekends, and like not because he wants to. You're like, that's sad. I don't know. Anyway, that was my
Let's
take.
be real. Hentai websites.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know. I think maybe he could use a little spice in his life. But you just see that and you're like, oh man, this guy is just fucking.
I think that government service attracts a certain type, right? Certainly, having been in the Army, having seen some of that administrative government BS, I couldn't stay in. I couldn't do it, right? But there are some that like that monotony, like that security, like that guaranteed paycheck. I think government service attracts a certain type.
I think I was just having this conversation the other day. A friend of mine has been a Green Beret for many years, and we were chatting together in the car, and we were talking about exactly that. And I was like, I think there's 3 kinds of people that end up in power positions or like in those fields. And it's those who want to be the change in the world, those who want to manipulate the change of their own situations, and those who kind of have nowhere to go. Like, especially when it comes to like military, like there's people who end up in those places who end up with nowhere to go, and they go in the military. And there's some people that I met who are like, I never thought I'd be in fucking special forces, but here I am. Then you have those other people who are like, yeah, I'm gonna change the world from the inside, and then you get JFK'd. Or it's like, I'm gonna or they end up jaded and broken. And then you have just the fucking assholes who are like, yeah, I'm going to turn this traffic stop into a shooting incident. And you're like, you need to calm down, dude. Like, fuck. I've had some people like that at some CQB classes and stuff I went to. You have someone who's there.
I'm going to throw a number out there. 40%.
Oh no!
They got
with no context. 40%.
They got a the spiky hair, and like I said, the indents on the side of their head from wearing their Oakleys like backwards on the back of their head, and they got the t-shirt with like the tap out looking design on it. And I'm like, I bet
that guy pulls you over, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you wear jeans with embellishments on them. Say you have those guys, and then they're fucking officers, and I'm just like, stop.
Yeah, no, you got a taillight out. He's going to kill you.
Well, and then you go to places like Arkansas, which funny because the cops out here like can't even. We're like a non-pursuit state. Like I don't even think they can pursue you if you're just driving, unless you do something reckless. Like they can't actually do anything. Like you can just be speeding, and they're just like, oh well, they're speeding, so whatever.
So Paige, that's because you live in a red state.
Right, but then compared to Arkansas, you go there and it's like, if you do not call the cops sir or ma'am, like they can just pull you out of the car and beat you in the swamp, and you're like, well, say ma'am or sir. You're like, no, we're in a different place.
This is why I drive a Prius. No one ever pulls me over. I've been pulled over once in my entire life.
Well, okay, don't come to Idaho. Wait, you are already in Idaho.
Oh yeah.
All right, in South Idaho, we don't have Priuses. We have trucks.
Yeah. You're going to get pulled over for a very different reason.
Yeah, they think whoever's driving it is just like the worst person, and they're just like, I don't want to deal with this right now. Or I'm going to get pulled out and lynched at some point, but we'll find out.
This will sound terrible, but in the last year or year and a half, I've been pulled over 3 times, and I haven't been pulled over in prior to this. I'd never been pulled over in 7, 8, 10 years, right? And last year and a half, I get pulled over 3 times, and granted, there was once or twice I was being stupid. But law enforcement was very professional. They were very respectful. I got off with a warning all 3 times. And yay team. But I also know that I worked with an at-risk youth very, very recently who decided he was going to flee from the police, and they brought down the hammer on him. He decided to do it again a week later, and they brought the hammer down on him. Um, so I feel like if you give respect, you get respect back. If you're going to be a shithead, if you're going to be an overachiever, then they're going to respond accordingly. At least here in Idaho, that's been my experience.
I found that pretty much everyone who refused to get the vaccine like got invites from like other places and the proximity. So like it kind of vetted out what was left of people who were willing to stand their own against the government. And then they went to places like Idaho or like just kind of spread out in other spots. By the way, everyone who held their own and was like, nah, my body, my choice, they couldn't, even if they got fired, like they didn't get fired. It's amazing how many people are like, I'd lose my job. And it's like, well, it's funny because like I know people working in the upper echelons of Amazon where they literally tried to like psyop them into getting the vax. And they're like, nah, fire me. And they're like, oh, fine, you can stay. And it's like, yeah, and you're going to give me a raise. And I'm like, good for you. Right on.
Yeah.
Now they're desperate. So now that's where like you have your little like 4 foot nothing, whatever, like, diversity hire female there who's just like, I can get him. And then she's just getting fucking crack rocked by some fucking tweaker, just like, flinging her off his arm. Like he's the Hulk fighting flies. It's incredible.
I basically have a timer down every time we're on an episode page, how long it takes for you to bring up tweakers.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now, Paige.
I honestly, it's like having two Nathans right now.
Sorry, I just went. But
I love it. Never change.
You didn't Paige change sides from like sensible to Nathan.
Hey, listen. I've done a good job keeping it on track. I was afforded.
Intrusive thoughts kick in when you think about someone doing meth.
No, but it's real though. I'm telling you, never fight a fucking crackhead. It's terrible. That's the point I'm saying.
From experience, spoken as someone who EDCs a brush cutting saw.
Arms dealing.
Yes. Yes.
So,
big question. Efraim, did he look like Jonah Hill?
He did. He did. And Jonah Hill nailed it because that laugh, nailed it.
Oh my god.
And the talking a mile a minute, nailed it.
Damn.
Yeah.
We were kind of touching on like the white hat side of doing international arms dealing. Does it require you to go abroad and do like a lot of in-person stuff at all, or is it a lot of like send and forget and it's no longer your on your plate?
Again, we come back to customer service. And so one of my business partners lives overseas. And, I don't think I'm revealing any secret sauce here. It's not a secret, but we have capabilities. We have people in country or in the region where most of our sales happen. He'll build the project. He'll hand it off to me. I work with the domestic manufacturers. I do the export licensing. I pack it. I work with the freight forwarder. I ship it. We send it to the end user, and then my business partner picks it up from there and does the after sales support. Customer service and after sales support are very, very important. And as an old guy relaying history, we see this from General Dynamics. General Dynamics made the Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher, and they sold them all over the world, but they didn't do after sales support. And so when these grenade launchers, Mark 19s that's probably my dog. When the after sales support element would come in, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't fix the guns. They wouldn't sell spare parts. They wouldn't do what they had to do to maintain that business. And so as a result, you see Turkey and Pakistan and Taiwan. Who else? There's 6 or 8 countries out there that make their own version of the Mark 19, and GD, in my opinion, really lost some of that business, right? I mean, some of these Mark 19s made by third parties, third countries, some of them work, some of them don't. But if they'd done the after sale support, then maybe they'd still have a lock on that market.
So now it's a case of like all these countries have their own they've copied their AR or AK successfully, and now it's just off to the races.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that internationally. We're fighting for a contract right now. But we're fighting for a contract right now where our competitor is trying to sell a weapon system at half of what we would normally charge. You can't compete on price alone. You know, you need to compete on capabilities, on reliability, on proven systems. People's lives are at stake when we do this. This isn't commercial sales where, you know, Paige and I go out to the range and we have a malfunction. Okay, no big deal. Put it down. We'll go home. We'll fix it. We'll come back tomorrow. I mean, these are going to foreign militaries with active conflicts. And if you're selling a weapon system that doesn't work, people die. You know, people die. I don't want that on my conscience. We sell high quality product. So, you know, you asked, does it require you to go overseas? Yeah, all the time. 2018, I think I left the country 14 times. This year, I will leave the country 4 or 5 times. I've got 2 international trips coming up before the end of the year.
There's also a SHOT Show overseas, like a different SHOT Show overseas, right? Like one in Germany or something that you go to?
Well, there's shows all over the world. You're talking about IWA, and I don't remember
That's what I'm
it's
thinking of. Okay.
for. Yeah, IWA. It's in March in Nuremberg, Germany. It's the European version of SHOT Show. It has grown quite a bit since I went for the first time back in 2010.
How is that different? Like because gun culture here is so under the umbrella of like FUD, you know, the FUD aspect of like the hunter outdoorsman or like the fat conservative, and like that's
This
just
is
kind of
more
the
people that want to buy like
Yeah.
air surface to air missile kind of systems, right? It's like more like big boy toys, right?
You know, it really depends on what show you go to, because the IWA show has an entire hall dedicated to European hunting clothing, right? I've come home with beautiful wool sweaters and Paige, maybe I'll send you a picture later. I've got a beautiful wool cape, hunting cape.
Oh, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah. You know, I saw it and my friends were like,
Jax
here,
would be
it's your
jealous.
size. Right. And I've worn it twice in 5 years. I hope my friends don't hear
Jason
this,
will fuck you up in cable knit. Be like, oh yes, cable knits and MP7s. It's a vibe.
Right. But then, you know, you go to other shows. You know, next spring is Defense Services Asia. It is the biggest show in Asia. And
When
every
next
country,
spring? Because you better not miss my expo.
I won't miss your expo. We're gonna be there. I haven't seen any signs. I haven't seen any like social media saying. I mean, there's Garantham. There's.
They're coming out. They're coming out one at a
Where's
time.
the Jason from Hurricane Butterfly social
It's
media?
coming. It's coming. Duh. Duh. If you don't know, just a quick plug, you know, pewpeepsexpo.com. Check it out. Throwing an event next April to bring in new gun culture as it shifted. We'll talk about that later in detail, but that's all.
You know,
Jason's going to be supplying a bunch of hopefully cool guns to look at for people to
MP7s.
finger fuck.
MP7.
you know,
You can take one home. This is not. Yes, they're for everyone.
no.
He's aggressively shaking his head.
In either case, you know, we'll be exhibiting at Defense Services Asia next year in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and we'll see customers there from all over Asia. You know, the Iranians will be walking that show. The Chinese will be there. The North Koreans show up.
That's going to be interesting.
It's fascinating, right? The Bulgarians show up and they've got all of their hand grenades and landmines, all inerted, of course. And you're like, oh wow, that's like, there's an F1 grenade. That's really cool, you know.
Now, I know that a lot of the Saudis are really, really, really into guns too. How, like, do you do work with any of them ever?
In the past, we've done some work with some Middle Eastern governments. You know, there was this one event that I recall. It was the horse show of all things. And you're like, what do you mean the horse show? Why aren't we taking guns to the horse show?
That checks out.
Yeah, right. And what they wanted was 20 suppressed 1022s. I kind of pushed back a little. I said, "What are you doing with these?" And they said, "Oh, we're going to give them away for free to our high value customers." And like I'm like, mind is exploding. I'm like, you can't do that. You know, we're gonna license this to, you know, a um, foreign military end user, and then you're gonna give them away. Like, what are you doing?
Hey, to
And I
be
get
fair
it.
though, some of those places, like whoever is in power, just like doesn't get touched by cops or you know, like in some of those places, they effectively have immunity
Well,
from
it's good to be the king,
everyone.
right? I mean, absolutely. You know, um, but that said, I mean, you know, we declined that transaction, and we said we're not going to be party to this. I know it might be legal for you, but now that I know what you're going to do with these, now that I know you're going to give them away to your high value customers, I don't want to be part of that. You know, I don't want to be involved in that. And so, you know, going back to the previous question, what does your day look like? It doesn't happen as frequently anymore. We have a pretty good network. We know who we're dealing with. But every so often, a stranger will call or email, and be like, "I want to do this," and you know, yeah, no, thank you. I don't need to do that. I don't want to do that.
Kind of customers that come in that are like obviously going to be way more trouble than they'd ever be worth.
All the time, yeah. But you know, we have a pretty good filter for that. You know, early in my career, I did a lot of um, small transactions, one or two guns going to a collector overseas that had deep pockets. And, you know, I remember this one collector in Australia, he collected Steyr rifles. And we'd, he'd buy these Steyr rifles off a gun broker, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 a rifle. And they just start stacking up like cordwood. And I recall a shipment, a single pallet with 50 of these Steyr rifles that was, you know, $150,000 worth of guns, you know, and he was just a collector. That's what he wanted to collect. Um, so I started my career in that capacity, and then we started doing some commercial resale. We'd buy Glocks and Smith and Wessons and all kinds of guns domestically, and it would be a gray market export. um, Gray
This is
market in the sense that we were licensed to do it, but we weren't authorized by the manufacturer to sell into that country.
Mm.
I think I might still be on the Glock do not sell list. We we bought thousands and thousands and thousands of Glocks and exported them. And I get it, you know. Now that I'm on the other side of the table, so to speak, we represent a number of U.S. companies, and we build projects, and we have a certain profit margin that we're looking for to compensate us for our efforts. And we get upset when somebody comes in and undercuts us and sells products that we are authorized to sell and they are not. Doesn't happen as often. It often happens with optics and spotting scopes because they are not controlled as tightly as firearms. Um, so I've been on both sides, you know, the
has
bad guy
anybody
and the good guy.
ripped off your 40 millimeter saddle yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
He has a cool product he made that literally makes it so you can put your little less lethal foam grenades and shit in on the side of the gun instead of like putting them in your
I
holster.
saw those.
It's
Oh,
awesome.
I saw
was like,
those.
now I
You
just
put
need the 40
even
mil.
more lethal ones in there.
You could put lethal ones in there. The thing is that the National Tactical Officers Association (NTOA), they're kind of
Yeah.
the national association for SWAT teams, right? They came out and they said on average you need 1.7 rounds of less lethal to stop an engagement, but many agencies use a single shot launcher, and so where do you put your zero point 0.7 round, right? If it takes 1.7 rounds and you only have one round, where do you put that second round? And so we developed it's basically like a shotgun match saver, but it's dialed up to 40 millimeter. We have both single and double versions, and it mounts via a Picatinny rail on at the 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock position. And then it just allows officers to engage with that first round. Um, some agencies we've worked with, we're using bandoliers, but the bandolier moves, as you're engaging, so it's never in the same place. Other agencies tried to use a pouch on a belt or on a drop rig, but law enforcement already carries a pretty big load, and the last thing you need is to carry more stuff. And so this puts the round on the weapon. Um, when you need it, it is there. It is always in the same place. You can train, and it's always there. And now you have your second or third round if you need that.
It's interesting you just say that as far as like what people carry. Like everyone's got these kit build outs and stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, I do this thing and I got this and that. And now you have all of that, and people have these chest rig fucking GoPros they have to keep going, and the additional battery packs to make that run, and then all of the radio stuff. And it's like, if you've ever seen an officer walk around, they all end up looking like fucking like chunky robots because they can't even, I don't even know. I get annoyed with, I run such light gear because I'm super in my mindset of training is at most plate, like there's not good plate carriers for people with tits, period. I don't care. Oh, there's this conical one, there's whatever. No, there's not. There's just not. Like, unless there's child soldier size, like for me, even then, like I just need like a plate for each tit, and that's like where I'm at. But ultimately, as far as like plate carrier stuff go, you get all that shit going on. It's really hard to move around. You can't do it. Like I say you can't. There's a way to navigate, but it's really awkward. Like even like just putting shit on and trying it, being like, this sucks. I feel like an inefficient Ninja Turtle. Like, this is.
You mentioned Mike earlier, and Mike invited me out to his place to do some training, and I threw on my plate carrier and my mag pouches, and I did not have a radio. My IFAC, I left my IFAC in the truck because we didn't need it on my body, right? And we were doing drills, right? Mike's very good about that, and I decided very quickly that this is a young man's game, right? I'm old. I wasn't always in this position, in this role, right? But as I look back now, I see you, Paige. I see Lucas, Mike, of course, Brandon, Alex, Zadra, right? I'm like, who are these kids, right? I'm the old guy now, and I've got my helmet. I have my NEMI connected ear pro. I've got a plate carrier. I've got my primary weapon. I can do it, but I don't want to. It's a young man's game. I'm not running.
Straight up, I did an OP4 event the other day that was supposed to be force on force. It ended up being force on farce because I didn't fucking get any sims. But like some of the, as I understand it, I won't say who or what. Another day, when I say the other day, it could literally be the time from when I was born until today. Let's be honest. That's how anyone uses that phrase. But I was at an event like training with some SWAT guys in the area, and like they didn't want to put on their gas masks as they were too hot. So they got sims, but we didn't. And I was like, fuck you. Like I just sprinted like 3 flights of stairs, came around, and had I had sims, I would have lit your asses up. But now you don't have that pain reminder to humiliate you so that you learn from your mistakes.
That's just inefficient training.
Yeah, no, it is, because you need that. Like there's an embarrassment there. But like as far as like training goes, I bring that up because they are in real gear at that point. They're doing all those things, they're training. But you have these people who train all the time who don't even need those things necessarily, or they're not wearing them in a daily capacity for any like sort of quote unquote legitimate job or something like that, like that. So it's funny to me that you'll have these average people training substantially better than these poorly funded officer groups and stuff like that. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, we got to do this. I'm like, why would you take shortcuts for training when there's some fucking 13-year-old airsoft dude in Japan that if you hand him a gun right now, he'd fuck you all up, like, what do you?
Well, I think you also have to recall that what we do, our level of involvement, our level of interest certainly exceeds that of most law enforcement, and certainly exceeds that of most special operations guys. I remember reading this article of this special forces field grade officer. I think it was a major or lieutenant colonel. and he thought he was pretty badass. He was special forces, active duty special forces, and he got assigned to ROTC duty. And so for a year or two, he had to go teach at a university. And he thought, well, I'm going to keep my skills up to speed by going to IPSC and IDPA and 3-gun and whatever. And even though he's special forces trained, he gets there and he's just getting smoked by these civilian shooters, right? And he wrote about it and was like, holy smokes, like, I'm supposed to be badass, I'm special forces, but these guys train and they practice, and guys make fun of Lucas, but he's out there and he's doing it, right?
Oh yeah, I think you can make fun of the guy, but he could probably outrun and outgun most people, like in a lot of those situations.
He
I
will
haven't had the chance
outrun
to
me
meet him
because I don't
personally.
run, but yeah, absolutely.
He had a point that I actually liked a lot, and say what you will about the guy, but I actually really like this, and I think it's true. Like, if you're going to learn pistol shooting or any particular shooting, who do you want to learn it for? Special forces. Who do you want to learn it from? A special forces guy or someone who does it professionally, like a high level competition shooter or something like that? And he compared it to slices of a pie. You have someone where one slice of your pie is shooting guns, another slice of the pie is CQB, another slice of the pie is fieldcraft, how to read a map, jumping from planes. Or you have someone where that entire pie is just shooting a pistol. You want to eat that pie, like you want. And I've shot with guys who like, oh no, I don't need any instruction. I trained with NTOG. I was in CSOR or whatever, and they're all, I don't want to say dog shit, but they're not particularly good unless they put that time on their own, learning how to shoot outside of the military, outside of special forces, outside of law enforcement.
If you're not willing to keep learning, you suck. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, things change. You're always going to have it's a window of time where things need to adapt. There's always going to be a change of skill sets, a change of tools. How we fight wars is different now. There weren't drones, 60 years ago. There weren't, the optics and shit that we have even like 30 years ago or 20 years ago to this capacity. So, to your point of having someone who's well trained and knowing these things, I also bring up this point. People talk about LARPing. I ask, what is the difference between a soldier who's trained and hasn't deployed and someone else who's just LARPing? Because you will have people in their own backyard who have more active fucking training than a lot of military, law enforcement, shit like that combined. I'm like, so what is a soldier who hasn't deployed? How are they different? I mean, and I'm not discrediting in any way someone going in and signing up and putting in that time and effort to serve their country and do what they believe is right. But I think it's an important separation as far as people talk about skills. They will quickly invalidate people's skills, like, oh, you didn't do anything, you didn't sign up for it. I'm like, nah, like, they're signing up to defend the homeland from their own backyard without anyone keeping a leash on them if it comes down to that, and I respect that.
I do think that there's one important distinction to make between a soldier who hasn't deployed and someone who's just LARPing in their backyard, and that is the ability to waste taxpayer dollars. I did a lot of that. It was very fun.
Yeah, I've definitely shot rounds into a fucking berm because they didn't want to sign it back in.
Actually, like the thousands.
I already signed it out. I'm not filling out another form. Yeah. Shoot it. Like, all right, well, I have to clean the gun anyway.
Yeah, I've done this like a dozen times. Like, the military has a way of making even shooting not fun. Okay, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, we talked about FUDs earlier, and about 7 years ago, Paige is going to know who this is, and he will probably hear this podcast.
Oh, that's fun.
But he asked if he could sign out a post-sample HK. It was a G36, as I recall. I said, yeah, no problem. What are you going to do? You're going to go shoot this weekend? He goes, yeah, we're going to go shoot. I said, okay, no problem. And he came back the following Monday, and I go, how was it? Where did you do? He goes, well, we were LARPing. And I'm like, oh, no. This is the first time I'd heard the term. This is, 7 years ago or more. And I go, you were what? And he goes, yeah, we were practicing room clearing. My friend's parents have this rental, and it was vacant. And so we had a 3-man stack, and we're doing a dynamic entry, and we're clearing, we're practicing our room clearing.
Oh my God,
And,
I know exactly what you're talking
you know who I'm talking about.
about.
And like my head is just about to explode. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like with my post sample machine gun, like what happens if the neighbors call the cops because they see these 3 guys in kit kicking in the
Clearing
door
their mum's rental.
at mom's rental because they know who the neighbors are and you ain't
Just
the neighbor.
rich kid things. Don't worry about it.
What the fuck are you doing? You know, and so certainly at the time I was not very supportive. I did not understand it. I understand it better now. I support that idea that individuals and civilians can train and learn these skills, right? Lucas says this all the time. Like, Lucas isn't prior service. Why shouldn't I be able to learn these techniques if I want to, right? I support that. But
I gave that exact question to one of my good friends. He's had a lot of deployments overseas and seen a lot of work. And I don't want to like name drop him here just for his own personal out of respect for him, but talking about that, and I joked with him. I'm like, because he talked about like, no, like people don't need to do this. You're a fucking civilian. He feels very strongly about that. And we had a chat about it, and I was like, do I know enough like special forces guys to get the LARP pass yet? Like, to what extent? And he like laughed. He's like, oh yeah, no, you know, you're different. I'm like, well, like, how is that different? You know, like, I mean,
if you're different, what makes you different?
Yeah, why should I not be allowed to learn the things to defend my own life or to have those? Like, I take great stake in being useful, especially as a fucking woman, because there's a lot of useless fucking women. And I mean like useless women. They're not even having babies. Like, be a mom if you're going to be, you know, if you're just going to live your life, I'm going to do that. Like, that's fine. Being a mom is a fucking job. That's great. But like, especially as just like a chick, like there's such a huge lack of self-sufficiency and awareness there. And I feel like that's so fucking important for anyone to take your response. Like, we have a personal responsibility and accountability to take care of ourselves. Like, I assume no one's coming to save me. If shit hits the fucking fan right now, it's me and what I got near me, period.
Well, and I think small unit tactics are, one, they're fun, right? And 2, it teaches you to work as a team and communicate. You know, following up that doc story earlier in the show, I had a female employee that came to work early, and this is about a month ago. This is really recent. And a car pulls into our shop, our parking lot, and it's a single guy, and he sits there for 5 minutes, and then he pulls out and he leaves. And she's watching our surveillance cameras, and he's driving around the block, and he drives past our shop 3 or 4 times, you know. And she calls me, and I'm about to leave the house for work. I'm on my way, and she relays what's going on. I called one of my other employees, and he was on his way to work too. And this person had pulled over and was parked down the street from the shop, just on the side of the road, which in our neighborhood is very unusual. Yeah. And so my one employee pulled up about a half a block behind him, and I pulled in there, and I went nose to nose, so he wasn't going to leave very easily. And I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I don't carry concealed in Idaho. I carried concealed every day when I lived in Washington. And in the last 2.5, almost 3 years, I've carried 3 times. And this is one of those days. And I walked up to the car and I said, hey guy, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm just working on my laptop. And I go, no, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm working on my laptop. I go, I'm gonna ask you one more fucking time. The fuck are you goddamn doing? You just drove into my shop and you drove around the block 3 times. What the fuck are you doing? Who are you? And this is, you know, this is some PTSD from being doxxed, right? I mean,
yeah.
Who is this dude? We're not expecting guests.
Beyond being doxxed, like that's just suspicious, unusual behavior. Like that was every right to raise fucking eyebrows. Like I don't know who you are.
In the meantime, my employee pulls up behind him, and so now he's, you know, now I've got backup, right? My kid's in the car with my cell phone, like recording it on video in case shit goes down, right? And he goes, oh, I'm here to see so and so. I'm the unit, I'm the area rep, and we're gonna fix your forklift. And I go, oh, Right. Of course. Okay, deep breath. Okay, come on in. Yes, come take a look at our forklift. We weren't expecting you, right? Um, but unless you have some of that training, unless you've worked it out with the rest of the members on your team, unless you've talked through this, maybe you don't have that same experience. Maybe my employee doesn't know to stay back. Maybe my employee doesn't know to pull up once he sees that I'm engaging, right? I mean, any number of issues there. I see a value to LARPing. I see a value to civilian training.
Community matters. Community is
sure.
the thing you can do to fight back. Community.
For sure. And
There's so much power in that.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree.
And it's LARPing till it's not.
The funny thing is I now live semi-rural. I'm not in the city. I've got some acreage. My nearest neighbor is a quarter mile away, but I know my 4 neighbors better than I knew any single neighbor when I lived in the city. I mean, my neighbors have access to my house. They can get into my house if I'm not home. I've had my neighbors call me and say, "Hey, can I borrow your backhoe? Can I borrow your seeder? Can I borrow your tractor?" Yeah, you know where they are. You know where the keys are. Have at it. There's something to be said for rural living and community and knowing your people.
Well, even beyond rural living, like I don't know, I've talked about this in previous podcasts on here, just like even during COVID and stuff, my life didn't fucking change. The only difference is that if you didn't wear a mask at the grocery store, they yelled at you. Like ultimately, I still had, like in our apartment complexes that I've moved into, I've always written notes and given a card to the people next to me being like, "Hey, what's up? I'm Paige. This is Jackson. Here's my cat and my dog. They're pretty great. Say hi. Let us know if you need anything." And that goes so fucking far. If you aren't someone who's had the ice broken, just go break the fucking ice. Sorry if your neighbor's an asshole, but it's still good to know that if you can have some kind of common ground in the event of something not working, most sane people can respect that. So even if there's some, like, you don't have to like someone to have like a level of respect or something, but I've made really, really, really good friends and relationships that way. And Jax and I both have. Some of our best friends came out of our apartment complex during COVID. We'd go to Costco and someone would be like, "I don't need this many mushrooms." I'm like, "Great, we'll take the rest of them." Or like we'd buy produce and like share it with each other, or go to the farmer's market and bring, like, you can do that anywhere. Nothing is stopping you except for your ability to just reach out to those around you. That goes for guns, for food, for anything. That's really, really important. I did this survival course lecture from someone who does some pretty crazy stuff. He came out during the wintertime and did a lecture up here from this Tusk course they teach at Darcy. And he just kind of did like a breakdown of some things as like a preparatory course, I guess. But that was the thing. He's like, "Yeah, you need people. If you don't have people, like this lone wolf shit, you're going to fucking die, get enslaved, or both. Like that's just, fuck you. You need people." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Water is king, community is queen," in that order. And you're like, okay, that's hard shit.
When I brought in those HK 416 pistols, I wasn't the first to use that method, but the first to use it.
Tell us about that for some people who don't know what that HK project was. If you could just give a little
blurb about that. So ATF has since said you can't do this anymore, even though it's well within the letter of the law. As a general idea, I firmly believe that if you know the rules of the game, you can play the game. But if you don't know the rules, then don't bother playing, because
like a true lawyer,
what are you doing, right? Yeah. And so we found, obviously the HK 416 5-6 years ago was hot. It was very popular. It was the gun that killed Osama bin Laden, blah blah blah. And the 416 wasn't readily available to non-military, non-law enforcement. We've been talking about civilians, and I go on a little tangent. I'm sorry, law enforcement, you're civilians too. There's nothing different about you. You're not in the military. You're a civilian too. Shut the fuck up. but in either case, you know, it was very difficult to get a 416, and we found stripped 416 lowers being sold in Europe, and we bought every single last one that we could get our hands on. It was less than 100, and then we went and bought parts kits without the lower. And we documented all of this. We had the boxes. We had pictures of the boxes that said very clearly parts kit, and we had pictures of the lowers when they arrived and they were stripped. There was no parts on them, and we assembled them into pistols, and we imported them as pistols, 10.4-inch barreled pistols, and it worked. And we brought them in, and immediately the guys at online and in the forums were like, "You can't do this. This is bullshit. This is illegal. You're a criminal." And just the vitriolic hate that came out. Like, guys, I don't want to say I'm doing God's work, but nobody else is doing this.
Yeah, getting HKs into the US is impressive.
Right?
On its own.
You could have done this. You could have, but you didn't, and I did. So, you know, petty jealousy, hatred, you know, small wee factor. I don't know, but you know, we got a lot of hate from that, and that was the first time that I had kind of had to face that, and it was tough for the first week. And then I said, "Fuck you! I don't know who you are. I don't give a fuck what you think. Fuck you." And it got a lot easier after that. But you know, for that first week, you know, these people are just talking shit, and you're like, that's not right. That's not me. No, stop it. So, you know,
The best response to that always is just shut the fuck up and ignore it. Like
It's
most
just
of these people
the
have
weakest
one.
fucking energy.
Yeah,
Like,
most of the people
yeah.
have one follower and they're screaming into the void. You're like, chill out.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the people who are like terminally online that just look for things to get poopy about because they haven't had their pee touched.
well, and you know,
we touched on that a lot this episode.
you know,
but it's true.
My mentor talks about that all the time, right? You know, back 15, 20 years ago, we didn't necessarily have some of the online messaging that we have now. You know, if you want to go way back in history, one of the first gun boards was F.J. Vollmer, the Vollmer board, followed by probably subguns. And then much later came ARFCOM, AR15.com. But, you know, the first two were, as I recall, Vollmer, F.J. Vollmer, who was an HK gunsmith, and Tom Bowers out of Subguns. And my mentor would say, look, I don't have time to be on these boards. I don't have time to be on these listservs, you know, answering emails and commenting. I got work to do. You know, the guys that are doing the work, they're out doing it. And the guys that don't necessarily have the means or the methods, they're the ones behind the keyboards. They're the ones, you know, staring into their 4-inch screen on their phone. You know, I feel bad. I don't take social media very seriously. Maybe I should. I hardly ever post to Instagram. And when I do, it tends to be pretty good. But, you know, I look at others like Mike and admin and others that are posting 2 or 3 times a day. And I'm like, this is your entire life. I don't want to do that.
And it's a very different, it's very different, like culturally. Like, I think that to that note of just social media, it is a job. It's a job, period. Like, it takes so much energy to respond. Like, this is why every single major celebrity anywhere has a PR team who creates a voice and responds on social media on their fucking behalf. Like,
Right.
That's just how it is. Like, you're never gonna get a real fucking response from Taylor Swift in her DMs. Like, if you know her, you're gonna have her number. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. People have people really want to hate on social media too, in the way of like, oh, it's the worst thing that ever happened. In a lot of ways it is, but the reason I think it is because people conflate the opinions of others to all be on the same level. So whereas in real life, we should, in theory, have our like tight circles of people that we actually call up when we want advice for something, because we have people we don't want to call. You know, maybe you can't stand your parents. You know, if you tell your dad something, you're like, oh my God, shut up. I don't want to hear what you have to say about this. So you ask your best friend or a mentor or whatever. You know, in real life, you're people who you don't really associate, who otherwise would never have any sort of line to you, they now get their statement in front of your eyes. They now get their statement into your emotional space. And you have to be really, really good at vetting your emotional space to be able to do that. So I don't think it's a bad thing that you don't engage in social media to that extent. Like, would it be more beneficial for your business to grow it in what's arguably the only free marketing? It could be, but in your particular line of business, probably fucking not, because I'm getting shadow banned and post reported for literally drawing guns, let alone someone who actually works in them in the capacity that you do.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, I'm actually doing the work, and I don't have time to be posting on social media.
No,
Yeah.
too busy performing HK magic tricks.
There you go.
It feels like a full-time job. It is very time-consuming.
Well,
No,
but you know, that just goes back to my point where, you know, it's the guys that are stuck behind the keyboard that are complaining the loudest, whose voice is the loudest, who are probably the least aware, or at least capable of opining about much of anything, or maybe they know such minutia that, okay, yeah, you have a valid voice, but why? Like, I don't need to get down into the weeds on that. I don't know. I just don't have much use for social media these days.
and you
I
know,
wish I could do it.
I think it is, like, to your point, like, it does validate the fact, like, I don't have the time for it. Social media is time consuming. It is a lot of work, even if you're just posting correctly or doing the thing. Like, it's not a place to just, people use it as a platform to air out dirty laundry and stuff, but it's better to elevate it in a spot that highlights, I think, the good things. People are like, it only shows everyone's good parts. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of nice to have something to look at sometimes where you're like, cool, I have a history of good days to look at. Because everyone else's life, we all got the ups and downs. Every movie, you know, goes to post-production to have it chopped down to look good. No one's life is different on social media that way. But there is something to be said about, there is a cultural shift, and there are people who don't let go of it in their lines of work, where I'll help a lot with marketing, or companies will be like, I don't know what to do. I need to sell money. And, you know, we're really traditional. I'm like, that's cool. Do you want to be traditional, or do you want to make money? Because they're not the same. Otherwise, someone ends up selling VCRs in a world where no one has them anymore. I'm like, I'm glad you're a VCR expert, but we've moved past even DVDs. Like, we're in something else now. You've got to go on to the next thing.
The blockbuster problem.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. So there are those, like, changes that happen. And to that note, have you seen, I mean, because you've been doing this for what, like 20 years at least now?
More.
Yeah, you've been doing this a long time. So what are the, and you've kept pace with what you've done. What's like a major, I guess, shift or cultural shift that you've seen from when you've started to now, as far as the demand or how your dynamics have changed?
You know, and damn it, Lucas is going to come up again. You know, my first rifle I purchased in 1990. It was a Colt AR-15 16-inch barrel with shorty handguards, collapsible stock. I paid $850 for it. I bought it in Colorado when I was going to school, and it was a private sale. I remember going to the guy's house and sitting in his living room and looking at it, new in the box, $850. And it was a big deal, you know. Black rifles had a very bad stigma, you know. Why do you need that? Why do you need 30 rounds? Because I want to, because it's fun, you know. In the last 15, 20 years, I've seen the black rifle really become mainstream and really become readily acceptable, you know. The AR-15 has done amazing things to the 2A community, where, you know, nearly every single part can be manipulated, can be changed, can be modified to some low, mid, or up, you know, top tier product, right? And so, you know, in my, I guess it's been about 30 years now. It's the rise of the black rifle. It's the rise of, why do you need that, versus this is just cool, and this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to shoot.
That's so interesting, because I feel like the argument is the opposite so much, being like, back in the day, No one like, I feel like I see that argument a lot of being like, oh yeah, guns were more available and these things here. And for you to say that now it's more accepted, like with the pressure of the media and everything else and all these things, that's just an interesting take, that it's almost opposite to what I would assume it to be.
Well, and I think it goes both ways, right? And the listeners to this podcast will just blow their minds. Where in 1999, I bought a registered HK sear, and I think I paid $2,000 for it. I bought a AR-15 drop-in auto sear. I think I paid $1,500 for it. And then I bought a MAP 10, a full auto MAP 10 for $750. And this is in 99, right? I've certainly bought and sold many firearms since then. But, we used to joke back in the late 90s, early 2000s, these are the good old days. These are the good old days right now. And I look back 20 years later, I go, yeah, those were the good old days.
So you guys were kind of conscious of something? Like,
yeah, we were
coming to change?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember going to Knob Creek and they were selling 1919 parts kits for $350, and I made $12,000 a year back then, and I didn't have $350, and I never bought that. I never bought a 1919 parts kit. I have a 1919 now, but I would have bought 5 of them if I had the money. I saw all kinds of things that come up for sale, and my advice to guys now is if you see something, you buy it. If you've noticed, in my experience, a lot of people in the gun culture are quote unquote cheap, right? They don't want to spend money. They want to get the top. They want to buy Daniel Defense on an Anderson budget, right? And I think that happens because there's so much that's available. You only have so much budget, and the things you want to buy are always exceeding your budget. And so my advice is, if you see something that's unique that you want, you grab it. I haven't shown you this. I don't. Well, Paige has probably seen it. I collect inert ordnance, and people talk about the G11, but who's ever seen G11 ammo, right? I've got 2 rounds of G11 ammo. I paid $50 a piece for them. I have no idea what they're worth. Maybe they're worth garbage now, right? Maybe they're not worth anything, but they're important to me to spend $100 on, and it sits in my collection, and I've never seen it come up available for sale again, right?
Yeah.
When you see something you want, you grab it. I'll be back. No, the be back bus doesn't come back.
There's so much like that. Like, I mean, one thing that I've been kind of, it's a small thing, but something I've been pursuing is e-mags. As a Brit, I'm like, what the fuck happened to e-mags? Like, a few years ago, you could order them on Gun Mag Warehouse or wherever, and they were just like a thing. And now, like, I looked on TaxSwap, someone was selling 4 e-mags, which are, for anyone who doesn't know, because why would you? They're like European firearm compatible PMags that are just slick. And now on TaxSwap, I saw 4 for $350, and I was like, "Oh my god!" There you
Magic
go.
the Gathering.
G11 ammunition. That's
crap.
cool as hell.
Yeah.
Fancy. Those of you can't see, yeah, it's just, what the this shit looks so weird.
Caseless ammunition.
Looks like a replacement tooth.
Kind of. Yeah.
See,
That's awesome.
I'm worried that we might have listeners who are too young to have played the original Black Ops when it came out to even know what the G11 is, which is the only reason I would know what it is, yet alone actually being of an age where G11s were like the newest thing.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. We'll have to check
wild.
that.
Do you have one in the warehouse?
I don't. I did get a chance to play with one. Early in my career, I worked on Capitol Hill for a U.S. senator, and one of the curators, one of the directors, somebody high up in the Smithsonian came to my office to meet with my boss, and I asked him, I'm like, I heard you guys have an amazing firearms collection. He goes, yeah, we do. I'm like, can I check it out? And he's like, yeah, you can.
Oh
Call
my
this guy.
god.
Call this guy. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I think I was 25 years old, 26 years old. And And I called the guy. I'm like, hey, I'm so and so from Senator so and so's office. Can I get a tour? And he's like, yeah. And we went down there, and I recall that day there were some guys from Glock there, and they were doing research on trigger mechanisms. I don't know what they were doing. I didn't talk to them, but guns from Little Bighorn were there. There was a G11 there. There was all kinds of stuff, and I spent an hour or maybe an hour and a half in the facility. The collection at the time, maybe it's moved by now, but the collection at the time was in downtown DC. It was in one of the Smithsonian buildings, and it was just wild. So I have had a chance to handle a G11. I've never been to the HK Gray Room, so I'm going to throw that out there. If anybody from HK is listening, I want to go. I'd love to be there. Never been to the Gray Room, but life is long. I'm not dead yet.
Just go get one, Jason. It'll be fine.
It's okay. Get one.
You get a call to someone, be like, I have a G11. He'll be like, all right, we're in.
All right, send it.
Got this.
My for all the work that I do and all the guns that I've handled, we've seen some really rare guns go through. We saw a Luger Night Watchman go through the shop, and we didn't know what it was at first, and we took it out of the box, and my assistant at the time is playing with it, and he's dry firing it, and we're like, yeah, okay, it's a Luger, big deal. And for those that don't know, the Night Watchman version, it's a World War II Luger with a external light mounted to it, and it's the very first example of a weapon mounted light. It came out in
looking at this now. That is wacky.
It's like 5 lumens, kind of like 2 candela.
Yeah, but it's the very first example of a weapon mounted light. I mean, it's historical. Yeah. And this gun was 6 figures, and I looked at the pack list. I'm like,
only 6 figures?
Yeah, only 6 figures.
That's surprising.
Well, yeah,
that's a lot.
At the time, it was 6 figures, and I told my assistant, I'm like, put that down very carefully, slowly. Put it down now. My Grail guns. I'm looking for a Beretta 93R, which I found some in Europe, but I can't get them in. And my other Grail gun is a F1 FAMAS.
Same.
Speaking of Black Ops, the single best gun that they had on that.
It hurts me to hear that you're after a French gun, but
well, dropped once, it's fine.
I guess.
I'm teasing. I've worked with the French. They are very capable. They don't fuck around. I am just kidding about the French. Dropped once.
They aren't.
Yeah, that's like no. I'll save my French bashing for another time. No,
nothing runs as deep as Europeans' hatred for each other.
Oh, you're from 2 hours away from me? Get fucked.
You're inferior.
Yeah, Europeans and Asians have the most outstanding hatred for each other. Actually, pretty much everywhere outside of America actually hates everyone else.
Everyone hates everybody.
Yeah, say Europeans
this place is very tolerant.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Europeans hate every other kind of European. Same with Asians. Yes. Like, you should hear my mother, when I told her I was going to visit Hong Kong, she flipped the fuck out. She hates Hong Kong people. She hates everyone that's not her specific. I mean,
I understand being a little upset about the Nanking massacre. It's all, I get that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get that.
Don't ever bring up Unit 731.
Yeah. Faction 731. Oh, God, that's a whole episode on its own. We'll have to make that a thing sometime.
Yeah.
But on that note, though, Jason, we covered a lot of fucking ground today. I know that you work in.
Shit.
Hey, for what it's worth, I mean, for the listener, we got a good spectrum in here, right? Even if we're just dipping our toes in the water. For people listening, is there a way that they can support you aside from having large scale international purchases? Like, is there any way that they can support you online or anything? Or it's just kind of like, if you're in business with me, you are. And if you aren't, you're not of that caliber. Yeah. Okay. Asper, the nod.
I don't even know how to answer that. I will say this, that I lack the personal patience to sell retail. It's all about knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses as well, and avoiding those weaknesses that are not going to help you, right? And so I would rather sell a pallet of guns, a pallet of ammunition, a container of guns, a container of ammunition to one guy, rather than sell a pallet of guns to 100 buyers, right? I don't want to, this will sound funny. I don't like talking to people. I don't like talking on the phone. I
I
don't,
remember during COVID, you were one of the only people you ended up having, I think it was in Sweden. You had an ammo. You had an ammo person you were able to get. And like I came over to your shop and helped one of your workers at the time like move. I don't remember how many million rounds that was. It was like a million something. It was fucked up. I was just like, and the forklift, they had these little shitty European pallets, and we did not have a European pallet jack. So we had to hand move like million plus rounds of ammo. And Jason was not there at the time. So I came in and was like, all right, I'll help. And I was like, man, this is fucked up.
that was our ammunition imports during COVID.
Yeah.
We identified the need very early in the pandemic. I remember being on a family vacation on the 4th of July of 2020, just submitting ATF Form 6 import permits by the score. I mean, I probably submitted 50, 60 import permits that day. And when we waited 4 to 6 weeks for them to all come back approved, and then come December of 2020, when the shit hit the fan and there was no ammo, we started bringing in ammo by air cargo, which was incredibly expensive. $10,000 to move a pallet of ammunition by air cargo. I think it added 10 cents a round, but there was so much margin there, like buyers would buy it.
It was sold out before it even got off the truck. I remember you had already sold, like there were people who bought huge orders. It was insane.
And we weren't the biggest importer. There were guys, of course, that did far more volume than I did. But, we ended up bringing in, I think, 65 containers in 21. We had 65 containers. And there were weeks where, I'm talking to Europe and I'm talking to domestic buyers, gun stores, ranges, whatnot. They're just trying to survive, right? And we would have 2 or 3 containers on the move domestically. We'd have 2 or 3 on a boat, or maybe 1 on a boat and 2 more on a different boat. We had containers moving, and then we had 4 or 5 containers being loaded in Europe that were on their way. We'd have 8, 10, 12 containers we're trying to track all at once because they're all on the move, right? 9mm, you're looking at 1 million rounds of 9mm in a single container on 223.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Oh, you.
I was there.
Yeah. on 223,
I got my squats in that day, boy.
Yeah. 223, you're looking at maybe 750, 800,000 rounds per container. And the numbers, if you haven't dealt with those kind of numbers, if you haven't seen that kind of volume, I mean, there's dealers, there's distributors that see that all the time, but for most average consumers, you just don't see those kind of volumes. It blows your mind, to see that. That's how we survived COVID. We imported ammo.
Yeah, I remember everything else went on hold, and you're like, "Fuck it, ammo's selling." That was the hand sanitizer of the gun world. There it was, mass and hand sanitizer. It was 9mm and 223. Here it is.
You asked how people can support us, and this is going to sound really trite, right? I imported 65 containers of ammo, and we knew that at one point the bottom was going to fall out. We knew that the end was going to come. And I was fairly strategic. I'm a little proud. I have probably 3 pallets of ammo that never got sold.
And the rest, all gone?
All gone. I mean, a container is, depending on whether it's standard pallets or Euro pallets, you're looking at between 10 to 14 pallets in a 20-foot container. And so to import 65 containers and then have 3 pallets left, I have a little bit of 5.56 SS-109. I've got some 45 Spear Gold Dot. I've got some 38 Special round nose solids. if there's a distributor out there, buy my ammo. Help me.
So, on the note of all your distribution and your adventures here, what dad advice can you give the people listening?
Yes.
As the self-proclaimed old guy out here, what just give us some nuggets here for everyone listening.
30 years in the industry, you got to have something.
I'm going to repeat the dad advice that I gave on the GT episode where I actually showed my face. I was actually behind the scenes on a lot of Mike's videos, but I think I'm only appear on one. And I'm going to repeat that advice, which is, when I was a young man, 17, 18 years old, my dad said, if you're concerned about your partner, look at his or her actions. Don't listen to the words. Your partner can say, "Oh, I love you," and then just be a terrible human and be having an affair or not being attentive or just being a bad human, right? He said, look at their actions, listen to their actions, don't listen to their words. And that has served me well through my life. The other point of advice that I have was given to me by a 2-star general when I was a first lieutenant. I went into his office and I needed him to sign some documents. And he said, look, Lieutenant, what sets you apart from any other lieutenant here on post? I said, I don't know, sir. He says, integrity. Integrity is what sets you apart. If I ask you something, then tell me straight. Don't beat around the bush. Don't give me a half truth. Like integrity. That is the only thing you have. And if I find that you lied to me or you misled me or you were not fully honest, I will replace you in a heartbeat. There are 50, 100 other lieutenants out there that want to be doing what you're doing. The only thing that sets you apart is your integrity. And so that I was older by then. I was a lieutenant. I was in my 20s for sure. And that's really stuck with me. Act with integrity. Do what you're going to say what you're going to do, follow up and do what you said you were going to do. Be a good human because that's all you have, right? That's all.
That's great. Yeah, and Jason, it was awesome having you on here today. I think it was really cool. We'd love to have you on again at some point. We'll get in the weeds about. I know we had a lot of story sharing. We'll get in the weeds about just like bullshit another time and have fun. Just getting a little schizo, a little silly together.
We can talk about Pakistan, trips to Pakistan.
Oh yeah, we.
Have you been to Khyber Pass?
I haven't. I tried when I was in Pakistan, but it really wasn't safe.
Damn.
But yeah, there's all kinds of stories to talk about.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on today and just having this and Jason, seriously, I've had the pleasure of knowing you now for several years, and it's really cool just to going through this episode with you, kind of reflecting, being like, hey, I was there for a few things. What do you know? That's pretty fucking cool. So it's neat to have gotten to have a little bit of a window to that and, have an interesting perspective in this world. You're part of the reason that I also got into firearm stuff in the way that I did, because a lot of people may not know that I was never really into guns in this capacity. I never had the access to them in the same way. So I think it's really cool that you guys have that. But on that note, thank you so much for coming on, Jason.
Thank you.
Hurricane Butterfly. How can you guys can follow him on Instagram? You're basically just on Instagram, right? Do you have any other social media that you're on, Jason?
I'm only on Instagram. We have a nascent baby Twitter account that I don't think we've posted anything to. We're kind of waiting to see how Twitter falls out and how based it becomes. We're working on launching a YouTube channel, doing some science behind less lethal rounds. That'll be out, I guess it's already Q3. I guess we're already behind. We're working on it. It'll come out eventually. But yeah, we're really mostly just on Instagram.
Yeah, I think your profile picture right now is Yuri Orlov, like the real one.
That's been, the past couple of days have been kind of a funny little, Mike posts a little reel about, oh, don't you know who my dad is? And of course that's my avatar on Instagram. I'm like, why'd you have to out me publicly, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that, I picked up like almost 300 followers in the last 24 hours because of that. I mean, social media is bizarre. I'm almost always shadow banned. Good luck finding me, but hey, I'm out
Yeah,
there.
that's the whole
yeah.
industry.
I think
All right, we'll link you
awesome.
in the post here. But seriously, thanks for coming on. This was really cool, and I'm sure as things unfold, we'll end up with even more questions, and you can think about more stuff you want to share down the road.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, guys. That was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Alright, so if you need to outfit a small army, that's hurricane_butterfly on Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.
We all done? Done recording?